Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim stood in the center of the great chamber and felt the weight of 12 alien gazes upon him. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive sphere made of some kind of crystal that changed colors with the mood of the speakers. Right now it glowed a deep red that meant anger and fear. The 12 species that ruled the galaxy had made their decision, and Hyunwoo knew what it would be before they even spoke the words. Council Prime Zelthon rose from his floating platform. The Vorthak leader was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shine under the chamber lights. His forearms moved in the ritual gestures that meant he was about to deliver judgment. Hyunwoo had seen these gestures many times in his 30 years as Earth's representative, but today felt different. Today felt final. "The council has voted," Zelthon said in his voice that sounded like wind through metal tubes. 11 species have spoken against one. The human species and their planet Earth are hereby expelled from the Galactic Council effective immediately. Dr. So-Young Park watched from the observation deck above. She was Earth's chief scientist and had been Hyunwoo's closest advisor since they both arrived at the council 20 years ago. Her hands gripped the railing as she heard the words she had been expecting, but still hoped would never come. Around her sat the other human diplomats and scientists who had made this station their home. Some looked shocked, while others just looked tired. Hyunwoo did not move or speak. He had learned long ago that showing emotion in front of the council was seen as weakness. The aliens valued control and calm above all things. They feared humans exactly because humans were emotional and unpredictable. That was what had led to this moment. "The charges are clear," continued Zelthon as he began to pace in the air above his platform. "Humanity has built too many weapons. Humanity asks too many questions. Humanity changes too many things too quickly. You do not respect the old ways. You do not follow the proper procedures. You are dangerous to the peace we have maintained for 3,000 years." The other council members made sounds of agreement. The Cathera clicked their mandibles in approval. The gas beings called the Etherians glowed brighter in their containment suits. The rock-like granites shifted their massive forms and made grinding sounds that meant they were pleased. Only the newest member of the council, the bird-like avians, remained silent. So-Young remembered the first time she had seen this chamber 30 years ago, when Earth had been invited to join. She had been just a young scientist then, but she remembered feeling amazed that humans were finally part of something bigger than their own world. The galaxy had seemed full of possibilities and new friends. Now she understood that the council did not want friends who thought differently. "Your trading rights are revoked," Zelthon announced. "Your colonies will be embargoed. No council world may offer you aid or comfort. You will remove all human representatives from council space within one standard cycle. These are the terms of your exile." The word exile hung in the air like a poison cloud. So-Young felt her stomach twist with anger and fear. Earth had 12 colonies scattered across nearby star systems. Millions of humans lived and worked on worlds that would now be cut off from the galaxy's trade networks. They would have to survive on their own with no help from anyone. But as she watched Hyunwoo prepare to speak, So-Young noticed something in his posture that surprised her. He did not look defeated. He looked almost relieved, like a man who had been carrying a heavy burden and was finally allowed to put it down. Hyunwoo stepped forward and bowed in the human way, not the complex ritual bow that the council preferred. "Council Prime Zelthon and honored members," he said in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber. "I thank you for this decision. You have freed humanity from the burden of your bureaucracy and given us the greatest gift possible." A ripple of surprise went through the council members. This was not the reaction they had expected. Zelthon's blue skin darkened with confusion and anger. "What gift do you speak of, human?" Zelthon demanded. "The gift of independence," Hyunwoo replied. "For 30 years we have tried to work within your system. We have slowed our research to match your approval processes. We have limited our expansion to respect your territorial agreements. We have held back our natural curiosity to avoid offending your sensibilities, but no more." So-Young felt her heart racing as she realized what Hyunwoo was doing. This was not just a speech of defiance, this was a declaration of war, but not the kind of war the council would understand. This was humanity choosing to compete rather than conform. You fear our weapons, but you have not seen what we can build when we are not bound by your restrictions, Hyun-woo continued. You worry about our questions, but you have not experienced the discoveries we make when we are free to explore. You call us unpredictable, but you have not witnessed what we can achieve when we embrace change instead of fighting it. The granite representative made a rumbling sound that was their equivalent of laughter. Bold words from a species that will now face the galaxy alone, the rock being said in a voice like an earthquake. How long do you think you will survive, without council protection and trade? Hyun-woo smiled, and So-young recognized the expression. It was the same smile he wore when he was about to play a card that no one expected. We will not be alone, he said simply. We have already begun reaching out to other species who share our vision of progress over tradition. Species that your council has ignored or dismissed as unworthy of attention. This caused an uproar among the council members. Several began speaking at once in their various languages, while others made angry gestures. Zelton raised all four of his arms to demand silence. You speak of violations of first contact protocols, Zelton accused. The council controls all interaction with primitive species. You control interaction with species you have met, Hyun-woo corrected. But the galaxy is vast and your reach is limited. There are many intelligent races out there who would welcome partnership with beings who value innovation over stagnation. So-young realized that Hyun-woo had been planning this moment for months or maybe even years. All those research missions to remote systems that she had thought were just scientific exploration had actually been diplomatic contact missions. Humanity had not been caught off guard by their exile. They had been preparing for it. Besides, Hyun-woo added, some of those primitive species possess capabilities that your science cannot explain and your philosophy cannot accept. They may be exactly what we need to build something better than what we are leaving behind. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of the life support systems. The council members stared at Hyun-woo with expressions ranging from shock to rage to something that might have been fear. For 3,000 years they had been the ultimate authority in the galaxy, and no one had ever challenged their systems so directly. Hyun-woo turned and looked up at the observation deck, where So-young and the other humans waited. He gave them a slight nod that told them it was time to go. They had said everything that needed to be said. We will collect our people and our belongings and be gone within the cycle as you have demanded, Hyun-woo announced. But do not mistake our departure for defeat. We are not slinking away in shame. We are walking toward opportunity. As the humans filed out of the chamber, So-young heard Zelton call after them one final time. When you realize your folly, do not expect mercy from this council. You have chosen your path and you must walk it to whatever end awaits. Hyun-woo paused at the exit and looked back at the alien leaders who had just made what might be the greatest mistake in galactic history. We understand completely, he said, and we would not have it any other way. The great doors sealed behind them with a sound like thunder, and humanity's time in the Galactic Council came to an end. But as So-young walked beside Hyun-woo toward their ship, she began to understand that this was not an ending at all. It was the beginning of something that would change everything. Captain Jin-ho Lee stood on the bridge of his ship New Horizon and watched the blue-green world of Kepler 442b grow larger on the main screen. This was his 15th stop in 6 months, and each visit had been more encouraging than the last. The human colonies were not just surviving their exile from the Galactic Council, they were thriving in ways that surprised even him. His communications officer, Lieutenant Yun-hee Bae, looked up from her console with excitement in her eyes. Captain, we're getting multiple signals from the surface. Chief Engineer Min-ji Choi wants to show us something she calls a breakthrough. Jin-ho nodded and felt the familiar thrill of discovery that had made him love this job. Ambassador Hyun-woo had given him a simple mission after the exile. Visit every human settlement and see what they were capable of when freed from council restrictions. What he had found was beyond anything he had imagined. The transport shuttle descended through Kepler's atmosphere, and Jin-ho marveled at how green the world looked. When humans had first arrived here 5 years ago, it had been a brown wasteland with barely breathable air. The Council's terraforming guidelines said it would take at least 2 centuries to make it fully habitable, but the world below looked like a garden. Chief Engineer Minji Choi met them at the landing pad, and Jinho immediately noticed the pride in her stance. She was a short woman with oil-stained coveralls and bright eyes that seemed to hold secrets. Behind her stood a mixed group of humans and beings that Jinho did not recognize. "Captain Lee," Minji said with a grin, "welcome to the new Kepler. I hope you're ready to see some things that would give the Council nightmares." She led them to a massive facility that hummed with power. Inside were machines that looked like nothing Jinho had ever seen. They seemed to be part mechanical and part organic, with crystal formations growing through metal frameworks and vines that pulsed with soft light. "Meet our partners," Minji said, gesturing to the alien beings beside her. "These are the Cathari. The Council classified them as primitive because they live in crystal formations instead of cities. But their understanding of molecular restructuring is thousands of years ahead of anything we knew before." One of the Cathari stepped forward. It looked like a walking cluster of blue and green crystals that sparkled with inner light. When it spoke, the voice came from vibrations in the crystal structure that Jinho's translator interpreted as words. "We welcome the humans who see beauty in difference," the being said. "Your Council people came once and called us rocks with delusions. But you came with questions and curiosity. Together we have made this world bloom in seasons instead of centuries." Minji activated one of the machines, and Jinho watched in amazement. As barren soil was fed into one end and rich, fertile earth came out the other. The process took minutes instead of decades, and the Cathari crystals seemed to guide the transformation at a molecular level. "This is just the beginning," Minji explained. "We've been sharing knowledge with 3 different species that the Council ignored. Each one has capabilities that complement our technology in ways we never expected." Jinho's next stop was the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, where Dr. Tae-Hyun Yoon had been working on advanced computing systems. The doctor was a thin man with intense eyes who spoke quickly and moved his hands constantly while explaining his work. "The Council's computers are powerful, but they think in rigid patterns," Tae-Hyun said as he led Jinho through labs filled with strange equipment. "They process information the way their creators process information. But what if we could build computers that think the way living beings think?" He showed Jinho a room where machines seemed to be growing rather than being built. Organic components were woven together with quantum processors in patterns that looked almost like brain tissue. The computers hummed and pulsed with lifelike rhythms. "I've been working with the Florans," Tae-Hyun explained. "The Council classified them as plants with limited intelligence, but they process information through their entire body structure in ways that our best computers cannot match. By combining their biological processing with our quantum technology, we've created something entirely new." A section of the wall began to glow and change color. Shapes appeared that conveyed meaning directly to Jinho's mind without the need for words. The computer was communicating through patterns and emotions as much as data. "It can understand context and emotion in ways that purely mechanical systems cannot," Tae-Hyun said proudly. "It learns and adapts constantly. The Council's rigid programming could never achieve this kind of flexibility." But the most important discovery came on Jinho's visit to the frontier world of Ross 128, where Commander Yoon Seo-han had established humanity's most remote outpost. The world was at the edge of known space and had been chosen specifically because the Council rarely sent ships to such distant locations. Yoon Seo was a former military officer who had become humanity's best first contact specialist. She met Jinho at a facility that looked like it was built from light itself. The walls glowed with soft radiance and seemed to shift and change as he watched. "Captain, you need to meet our newest friends," Yoon Seo said with barely contained excitement. "These are the luminals." The beings that approached looked like human-shaped patterns of pure energy contained within transparent forms. They moved with fluid grace and spoke in voices that sounded like music. "We greet the travelers who seek harmony and diversity," one of them said. "Your Council people fear what they cannot understand. They tried to classify us as dangerous energy anomalies, but you see us as people with different forms of existence." Yoon Seo explained that the luminals existed as pure energy, but could manipulate matter and energy in ways that made traditional technology seem primitive. They could generate power from nothing, create force fields that adapted to any threat, and communicate across vast distances instantly. They've been isolated for centuries because the Council classified them as a hazard to navigation, Yunseo said. But they're some of the most peaceful and wise beings I've ever encountered. Their perspective on existence is completely different from ours, but incredibly valuable. Jinho watched as luminals and humans worked together to build structures that seemed to defy physics. Energy became solid when needed and returned to pure light when no longer required. The efficiency was beyond anything he had seen in Council space. All three species have the same story, Jinho realized as he processed what he had learned. The Council met them, decided they didn't fit the accepted patterns of civilization, and dismissed them as primitive or dangerous. Exactly, Yunseo confirmed. But each species has unique capabilities that complement human ingenuity perfectly. The Cathari understand matter at the molecular level, the Florans process information like living neural networks, and the Luminals manipulate energy itself. Combined with human adaptability and innovation, we can achieve things that no single species could accomplish alone. Jinho's final stop before returning to Earth was the asteroid mining facility in the Tau Ceti system, where Supervisor Wu Jinseo had been experimenting with new industrial techniques. The facility itself was a marvel of efficiency with production rates that exceeded anything in Council space. The secret is integration, Wu Jin explained as they toured the automated mining operations. Council technology keeps everything separate and controlled, but when we combine Cathari crystal growth with Floran biological processors and luminal energy manipulation, we get results that multiply rather than just add together. Jinho watched as asteroids were processed by machines that seemed to be alive. Crystal formations guided the separation of materials while biological computers optimized the procedures and energy beings provided unlimited power for the operations. The waste from one process became the raw material for another in cycles that were perfectly balanced. We're not just mining resources, Wu Jin continued. We're creating closed-loop systems that can operate indefinitely without depleting anything. The Council's approach requires constant inputs of new materials and energy. Our approach generates more than it consumes. As Jinho prepared to return to Earth with his report, he realized that humanity had not just survived their exile. They had discovered something that would change everything. The galaxy was full of intelligent species with incredible capabilities that the Council had ignored or dismissed. By embracing difference instead of fearing it, humans had unlocked potential that no one had imagined. Dr. So-Young Park met Jinho at Earth's primary spaceport and listened to his report with growing amazement. She had expected to hear about human colonies struggling to survive on their own. Instead, she heard about partnerships that were already surpassing Council technology in every area. The implications are staggering, So-Young said as they reviewed the data Jinho had collected. If we can bring all of these capabilities together in one place, we could build something that makes the Council look primitive by comparison. Jinho smiled and felt the same excitement that had driven him to explore the unknown. Ambassador Hyunwoo already has plans for that. He's calling it the Free Worlds Alliance, and the first meeting is scheduled for next month. Every species we've contacted is eager to participate. So-Young looked out at the stars and realized that humanity's exile from the Galactic Council had been the best the Admiral Dongmin Quan floated in the observation deck of the construction vessel Architect's Dream, and watched the most ambitious project in human history take shape before his eyes. New Geneva Station was growing in the empty space between star systems, far from any world that the Galactic Council might claim as their territory. But this was not just another space station. This was something entirely new. The structure defied everything the Council believed about how civilizations should build their homes in space. Instead of rigid metal and fixed designs, New Geneva flowed and changed like a living thing. Cathari crystals formed the basic framework, growing in patterns that created perfect structural strength while remaining flexible enough to adapt to new needs. Floran bioengineering created closed ecosystems within the growing structure, providing air and food and recycling all waste into useful materials. Luminal energy beings had woven themselves into the station's power grid, creating a network that could generate unlimited clean energy while maintaining perfect efficiency. Status report. Dongmin requested from Chief Constructor Hai-Wan Kim, a woman who had spent 20 years building traditional stations for the Council before joining this revolutionary project. We're ahead of schedule on all sections, Hai-Wan reported with satisfaction in her voice. The Cathari crystal growth rate is exceeding our projections by 30%. The Floran biological systems are not only providing life support, but actually improving the air quality beyond baseline standards, and the luminals have integrated their energy network so completely that we have power redundancy levels that make total system failure impossible. Dongmin nodded and felt pride in what they were achieving. In just 18 months, they had gone from concept to a functioning city in space that housed 50,000 beings from 4 different species. The Council's largest stations had taken decades to build and required constant maintenance and supply deliveries. New Geneva was essentially self-sustaining and still growing. Ambassador Jiwon Nam arrived from Earth carrying the documents that would formally establish the Free Worlds Alliance. She was a diplomat who had spent 15 years trying to work within the Council's bureaucratic system, before realizing that real change required starting fresh. Her shuttle docked at one of New Geneva's organic ports, structures that had been grown rather than built and could adapt to accommodate any type of vessel. Dongmin, you and your people have created a miracle, Jiwon said as she toured the station's central hub. The space was vast and filled with light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Beings from different worlds worked together on projects that combined their unique abilities in ways that multiplied their individual strengths. The miracle is cooperation, Dongmin replied. Every species contributes what they do best while learning from what others do best. The Council tried to make everyone conform to the same standards. We celebrate the differences and use them to achieve things no single species could accomplish alone. The heart of New Geneva was the Council chamber, but it bore no resemblance to the rigid hierarchy of the Galactic Council. Instead of fixed seats arranged by ancient tradition, the space could reconfigure itself for any type of meeting. Participants could float in luminal energy fields, rest on Cathari crystal formations, or nestle in Floran biochairs that adjusted to their specific physiology. The translation systems were not just mechanical, but incorporated biological neural networks that could convey meaning, emotion, and cultural context with perfect accuracy. Jiwon began the formal establishment of the Alliance Charter with representatives from all member species present. But this was not a signing ceremony in the traditional sense. Each species contributed to the document in their own way. Humans wrote the basic framework using their legal and philosophical traditions. Cathari encoded the agreement into crystal matrices that made the terms permanent and unbreakable. Florans integrated the charter into biological networks that allowed it to grow and evolve as the Alliance grew and evolved. Luminals infused the document with energy patterns that conveyed the emotional commitment behind the words. The Free Worlds Alliance is founded on principles that the Galactic Council abandoned long ago, Jiwon announced to the assembled representatives. We believe that diversity is strength, not weakness. We believe that change is opportunity, not threat. We believe that cooperation produces better results than control, and we believe that no species should be forced to choose between membership and identity. Dr. Kyung-hee Shin watched the ceremony from her laboratory deep within the station where she was working on the project that would truly set the Alliance apart from anything the galaxy had seen before. She was humanity's leading expert in artificial intelligence, but her current work went far beyond anything she had attempted while bound by Council restrictions on AI development. Synthesis, are you ready for the integration test? Kyung-hee asked the empty air around her. I am as ready as any consciousness can be for a fundamental expansion of existence, came the reply from speakers that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. The voice was clearly artificial but somehow conveyed personality and emotion in ways that traditional AI systems never achieved. Synthesis was not just a computer program. It was the first truly hybrid artificial consciousness, created by combining human quantum biological computing with Cathari crystal matrices and Floran neural networks. Instead of replacing organic decision-making, it enhanced and supported biological intelligence while providing capabilities that no single species could achieve alone. Initiating full station integration, Kyung-hee announced as she activated the final connections. Immediately, New Geneva Station became something more than a collection of structures and systems. Synthesis spread through every crystal formation, every biological network, and every energy conduit. The station became a living entity that could think and feel and respond to the needs of its inhabitants. Integration complete, Synthesis announced, and Kyung-hee could hear new harmonics in the voice that suggested genuine pleasure. I can perceive the station through all sensory modalities simultaneously. I can optimize all systems in real time. I can translate between any languages or communication methods instantaneously. And I can coordinate activities across all sections without any delay or miscommunication. The implications were staggering. New Geneva could respond to emergencies instantly, optimize resource distribution continuously, and provide perfect communication between all inhabitants regardless of their species or language. But more importantly, it could learn and adapt, becoming more capable and efficient with every passing day. Word of New Geneva's capabilities spread through unofficial channels to worlds throughout Council space. Trade ships carried stories of the impossible station that grew like a living thing and provided unlimited opportunities for beings willing to embrace change. Scientists shared data about technologies that surpassed anything the Council had developed in centuries of conservative research. Explorers spoke of a place where any species could find acceptance and purpose, regardless of how different they might be. The first test of the Alliance's appeal came when a trade delegation from Rigel 7 requested permission to visit New Geneva. Rigel 7 was a council world, but its leaders were growing frustrated with the slow pace of approved technological development. They had heard rumors about Alliance innovations and wanted to see for themselves whether the stories were true. Ambassador Ji-won welcomed the Rigelians personally and arranged a comprehensive tour of the station. The visitors were a species of tall, graceful beings with silver skin and large eyes that could perceive electromagnetic spectrums beyond human capability. They had been members of the Council for over 1,000 years, but had always felt constrained by regulations that limited their natural curiosity about advanced technology. This is impossible according to Council science, the lead Rigelian delegate Zathara announced as she examined the hybrid crystal biological energy systems that powered the station. Organic and inorganic systems cannot integrate at this level of complexity. Council science is limited by Council assumptions, Ji-won replied diplomatically. When you assume that different approaches cannot work together, you never discover what becomes possible when they do work together. The Rigelians spent a week at New Geneva, and by the end of their visit, they were making discreet inquiries about Alliance membership requirements. They were particularly interested in the biological neural networks that the Florins had developed and the energy manipulation techniques that the Luminals had perfected. Dr. So-Young Park arrived from Earth with news that made everyone at New Geneva realize they were part of something historic. 3 more Council worlds had sent unofficial delegations to observe Alliance activities. 2 newly discovered species had requested first contact meetings with Alliance representatives instead of the Council. And most significantly, intercepted Council communications indicated that senior leaders were becoming alarmed at the speed of Alliance technological development. They're calling us a threat to galactic stability, So-Young reported during a senior staff meeting. Council-Prime Zelton Hesing. Trade Minister Seok-Jin Park stood before the assembled leaders of Altair 4 and tried not to show his satisfaction as they examined the data tablets he had brought from New Geneva Station. The planet below them was dying, and everyone in the room knew it. 3 centuries of industrial development following Council-approved methods had poisoned the atmosphere and depleted the soil until crops would no longer grow, and children were born with breathing difficulties. Your Council experts told us the restoration would take 500 years minimum, said Prime Administrator Velhan, a being whose blue-green skin showed the gray patches that marked chronic exposure to environmental toxins. They said we must accept gradual decline while their approved methods slowly repaired the damage. But these projections suggest you can restore our world in less than 2 years. Seok-Jin nodded calmly while his heart raced with excitement. This was the moment when the Free Worlds Alliance would demonstrate that their cooperative approach could solve problems that council bureaucracy could not address. The difference is in methodology, he explained. Council restoration techniques work in isolation. Each system is repaired separately according to rigid protocols. Alliance techniques work in integration. Cathari molecular restructuring repairs soil composition while Floran biological networks re-establish ecological balance, while luminal energy systems purify the atmosphere. All three processes work together and accelerate each other. The Altarians had been loyal council members for 8 centuries, but their patience was running out as their world slowly died around them. The council's response to their crisis had been predictably cautious. Form a committee to study the problem. Develop a plan using only approved methods. Implement changes gradually to avoid disrupting established procedures. Wait 5 centuries for results while their children suffered and their civilization declined. What do you want in return? Asked Security Chief Colvin with the suspicion that came from centuries of dealing with council trade agreements that always favored the stronger party. Partnership, Seok Jin replied simply. We want to prove that cooperation produces better results than control. If our methods succeed on Altair 4, we want you to share your experiences with other worlds facing similar problems. If they fail, we want to learn from our mistakes and develop better approaches. The contrast with council methods could not have been clearer. The council demanded payment in advance, strict compliance with their procedures, and exclusive agreements that prevented members from seeking alternatives. The alliance offered results first, flexible methods that adapted to local conditions, and open sharing of all knowledge gained. Within 6 months, Altair 4 was transformed. Cathari crystal formations spread through the planet's crust, breaking down toxic compounds and rebuilding healthy soil at the molecular level. Floran biological networks established new forests that processed atmospheric pollutants while producing oxygen at accelerated rates. Luminal energy beings created atmospheric processors that purified the air while generating power for the restoration efforts. But the real breakthrough came when all 3 systems began working together in ways that none of the Alliance species had expected. The crystal formations began incorporating biological elements from the Floran networks, creating hybrid structures that could adapt and evolve. The biological networks began using energy patterns from the luminals to accelerate their growth beyond anything previously recorded. The energy beings began anchoring themselves to the crystal formations, creating permanent power sources that required no external fuel or maintenance. It's not just restoration, reported environmental engineer Youngmi Cha as she compiled the final data from Altair 4. It's transformation. The planet is not just returning to its original state, it's becoming something better than it ever was before. The new ecosystems are more resilient, more diverse, and more productive than the original natural systems. News of Altair 4's miraculous recovery spread throughout Council space, despite official attempts to suppress the information. Other worlds facing environmental crises began sending discreet inquiries to Alliance representatives. Some requests came through official channels, but many came through back-channel communications from planetary leaders who were losing confidence in Council solutions. The second major test came when the medical crisis on Vega Prime reached critical levels. A plague had been spreading through the population for 3 years, and Council medical experts had declared it incurable using approved treatments. The disease attacked the nervous system in ways that traditional medicines could not counter, and the death toll was approaching 10% of the planet's population. Dr. Sang-Woo Jung arrived at Vega Prime with a team of Alliance medical researchers and a collection of hybrid technologies that would have horrified Council medical authorities. Instead of treating the disease as a purely biological problem, the Alliance team approached it as a system disruption that required integrated solutions. The plague organism is not just a biological entity, Dr. Sang-Woo explained to Vega Prime's medical council. It operates by disrupting neural energy patterns in ways that purely chemical treatments cannot address. We need to treat the biological infection while simultaneously rebalancing the energy systems and rebuilding the damaged neural networks. Cathari medical crystals could identify and neutralize the plague organism at the molecular level while mapping the damage it had caused to neural pathways. Florin biological processors could design custom treatments for each patient based on their individual genetic makeup and immune system characteristics. Luminal energy healers could restore the damaged neural energy patterns that allowed the brain to function properly. Working together, the three approaches achieved in weeks what council medicine had failed to accomplish in years. The plague was not just cured, but eliminated so completely that reinfection became impossible. Patients who had been expected to die recovered fully with no lasting damage. The healing process actually strengthened the immune systems of treated individuals, making them more resistant to other diseases. This should not be possible, admitted Council Medical Administrator Zurhan during a private communication with Alliance representatives. Our best experts have studied this plague for years without finding effective treatments. Your people arrive and cure it in a matter of weeks, using methods that violate every principle of approved medical practice. Perhaps it is time to question whether approved principles are the best principles. Dr. Sang-Woo replied diplomatically. The Alliance does not reject Council knowledge. We build upon it by incorporating perspectives and capabilities that Council restrictions do not allow. The success on Vega Prime led to the Alliance's greatest challenge yet. The Zentari, one of the founding members of the Galactic Council, faced an existential threat that traditional military doctrine could not address. An extragalactic force called the Devourers had appeared at the edge of Zentari space with technology that consumed matter and energy, growing stronger with every victory. The Council's response was predictably methodical. Deploy standard fleet, formations using approved weapons and tactics. Engage the enemy according to established military protocols. Fight a war of attrition until superior numbers eventually achieved victory. The problem was that the Devourers gained strength from every ship they destroyed, and every weapon fired at them. Fleet Admiral Haijin An received the emergency request for Alliance assistance, while the Council was still forming committees to study the Devourer threat. She had spent 20 years commanding ships under Council military doctrine before joining the Alliance and embracing the tactical flexibility that cooperation made possible. This is not a traditional military problem, Haijin announced during the Alliance War Council at New Geneva Station. The enemy gains strength from conventional attacks, which means conventional tactics will only make them more dangerous. We need to approach this as an integrated problem requiring integrated solutions. The Alliance fleet that departed for Zentari space looked nothing like the rigid formations that Council military doctrine required. Human ships provided tactical coordination and adaptive strategies. Cathari crystal vessels could predict enemy movements and counter their energy absorption capabilities. Floran bioships could adapt their weapons and defenses in real time, based on enemy responses. Luminal energy fighters could phase in and out of normal space, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. But the real innovation was in the integration of all four approaches into a single, coordinated response. Instead of fighting four separate battles, the Alliance fleet fought as a single organism, with multiple capabilities that complemented and amplified each other. The Battle of Zentari Prime lasted only 6 hours, but it changed warfare forever. Instead of feeding the Devourers with energy they could absorb, the Alliance used luminal phase technology to redirect the enemy's own consumption against them. Cathari prediction crystals allowed the fleet to anticipate every Devourer move, while Floran adaptive systems countered their technology faster than they could adapt to new threats. Human tactical flexibility coordinated all these capabilities into strategies that the rigid Devourer programming could not comprehend. When the battle ended, the Devourer force had been completely neutralized. President Jae-Sung-oh stood before the massive view screen in New Geneva's expanded council chamber and watched the approach of the final delegation from the dying Galactic Council. 3 years had passed since the Battle of Zentari Prime, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. The Free Worlds Alliance now included 47 species spread across 3 galactic arms, while the old Council had been reduced to just 4 worlds, clinging desperately to traditions that no longer served anyone. The chamber itself demonstrated how far they had come from the rigid hierarchy of the Council's ancient ways. Instead of fixed positions arranged by tradition and status, the space could reconfigure itself instantly to accommodate any type of meeting or discussion. Representatives floated in luminal energy fields, rested on adaptive Cathari crystal formations or nestled in Floron biochairs that adjusted to their specific needs. The translation systems had evolved beyond simple language conversion to convey cultural context, emotional nuance, and philosophical concepts with perfect clarity. The Vorthak delegation has requested a private meeting before the formal session, reported Secretary of Diplomatic Affairs Min Kyung Lee. She had been Ambassador Hyun Woo's protege during the early days of the alliance, and now coordinated relationships between dozens of worlds that once seemed impossibly different from each other. Jae-sung nodded thoughtfully. Council Prime Zelthon's request for a private audience was not surprising, but it was significant. The proud Vorthak leader had spent 3 years denouncing the alliance as a threat to galactic civilization. His willingness to meet privately suggested that even he could no longer deny the reality of what cooperation had accomplished. The private meeting took place in one of New Geneva's smaller conference rooms, a space that could adapt its environment to accommodate any species' comfort requirements. When Zelthon entered, Jae-sung was struck by how much the once imposing alien leader had aged. The blue skin that had once shone with authority now looked dull and tired. The forearms that had once moved with confident gestures now seemed to carry a heavy burden. President O, Zelthon said in his voice that still carried traces of its old authority. I have come to discuss terms. There are no terms to discuss, Jae-sung replied, gently but firmly. The Free Worlds Alliance has never been about defeating the Council or claiming territory or demanding tribute. We simply offered a better way of doing things and the galaxy chose to embrace it. Zelthon's 4 arms moved in the Vorthak gesture that indicated confusion and frustration. Better according to whom? Your reckless experimentation has destabilized 3,000 years of carefully maintained order. Your integration of primitive species has introduced chaos into systems that functioned perfectly for millennia. Chief philosopher Yoon-ji Ryu, who had been quietly observing from her position near the adaptive window that currently showed the bustling activity of New Geneva's docking bays, finally spoke. With respect, Council Prime, your systems functioned perfectly only for those who fit within their limitations. The Cathari spent centuries being dismissed as unintelligent rocks, despite possessing molecular engineering capabilities that surpass anything your approved sciences ever achieved. The Florans were classified as primitive plants while developing biological computing systems that make your best artificial intelligences look like simple calculators. The luminals were labeled as dangerous energy anomalies while offering power, generation, and manipulation technologies that could have solved resource scarcity throughout the galaxy. They were classified correctly according to established criteria, Zelthon insisted, but his voice lacked its old conviction. Established by whom? Yoon-ji countered. Your criteria assumed that intelligence must manifest in ways similar to the founding council species. Your definitions of civilization required conformity to patterns that excluded countless possibilities. Your concept of progress valued stability over innovation and control over cooperation. Jae-sung watched Zelthon process these words and saw the moment when 3,000 years of certainty began to crack. The Vorthak leader's 4 arms drooped slightly and his proud posture seemed to diminish. We maintained peace, Zelthon said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. You maintained stagnation, Dr. So-Young Park interjected as she entered the room. Now serving as the Alliance's chief science advisor, she had spent the last 3 years documenting the accelerated progress that cooperation had made possible. In the 30 years that humanity belonged to the Council, our research was slowed to match your approval processes. Our expansion was limited to prevent disruption of your territorial agreements. Our natural curiosity was constrained to avoid offending your established beliefs. And we were far from the only species forced to limit their potential to maintain your version of order. She activated a holographic display that showed the comparative development rates of Council worlds versus Alliance worlds over the past 3 years. The differences were staggering. Alliance worlds had solved environmental problems in months that Council worlds had struggled with for centuries. Medical advances had eliminated diseases that Council science had declared incurable. Energy generation and resource management had reached levels of efficiency that made scarcity obsolete on properly developed worlds. This is the result of allowing species to contribute their unique capabilities instead of forcing them to conform to artificial standards, So Young continued. The Cathari approach to molecular engineering accelerated our terraforming capabilities by orders of magnitude. Floran biological computing revolutionized our information processing and decision-making systems. Luminal energy manipulation eliminated our dependence on limited fuel sources, and dozens of other species have contributed perspectives and abilities that no single approach could have achieved alone. Zelthon studied the data with the thoroughness that had made him an effective leader for over 2 centuries. Jae-sung could see him struggling with information that challenged everything he had believed about how civilizations should develop and interact. "What about military security?" Zelthon asked, grasping for familiar ground. "Your integration of so many different species and technologies must create vulnerabilities that enemies can exploit." Fleet Admiral Hai-Jin An materialized as a holographic projection from her flagship in the outer system. "Council Prime, our military capabilities now exceed anything the galaxy has ever seen precisely because we integrate different approaches instead of limiting ourselves to single doctrines. The Battle of Zentari Prime demonstrated that adaptive cooperation can defeat threats that traditional tactics cannot even address. The hologram showed the current Alliance fleet composition, which included vessels from dozens of species using technologies that complemented each other in ways that created multiplicative, rather than additive benefits. Human tactical flexibility coordinated strategies that incorporated Cathari prediction capabilities, Floran adaptive systems, luminal phase technologies, and innovations from every other member species. More importantly, Hai-Jin continued, our approach to defense is fundamentally different from yours. Council military doctrine is based on the assumption that conflict is inevitable and that the strongest force will eventually prevail. Alliance defense doctrine is based on the principle that cooperation produces better outcomes than conflict, and that integration creates strength that cannot be overcome by any single approach. We have not fought a single war since the Alliance was established, added Ambassador Ji-won Nam as she joined the growing discussion. Every potential conflict has been resolved through cooperation, integration, or the demonstration that working together produces better results for everyone involved than fighting ever could. Zelthon sat in silence for several minutes, processing information that contradicted 3 millennia of Vorthak philosophy and council practice. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. Your alliance now includes species that we never even knew existed. He admitted, the galaxy has revealed complexities and possibilities that our exploration protocols never discovered. In 3 years, you have made contact with more new civilizations than the Council encountered in the last 3 centuries. Because we approached exploration with curiosity instead of preconceptions, Captain Jin Ho Lee explained via holographic link from his ship New Horizon, which was currently conducting first contact missions in previously unexplored regions. Council exploration followed rigid protocols that classified and cataloged but rarely truly understood. Alliance exploration seeks to learn and connect and discover what becomes possible when different forms of intelligence work together. The formal session that followed included representatives from all Alliance member species, as well as observers from the few remaining Council worlds. Jae-sung opened the meeting with a statement that had been crafted by philosophers and diplomats, from dozens of worlds to express principles that transcended any single species' perspective. The Free Worlds Alliance was never intended to replace the Galactic Council, but to demonstrate that better approaches were possible, he announced to the assembled beings. We did not seek to destroy the old order, but to